"We will go the other way," said the Citroen designers, and designed the BX model in the early 80s. The machine turned out to be very unconventional. Today it is inexpensive and scares off many, although there are not so many reasons for this. The BX made its debut at the Paris Motor Show in 1982. Its body was designed by the famous Italian bodybuilder Bertone. At first, the car was offered with one of three petrol engines: 1.1L, 55 horsepower, 1.4L, 62 horsepower, and 1.6L, 90 horsepower. A year later, diesel modifications of 1.9 liters, 65 horsepower, appeared. The station wagon, according to the tradition of the company, having the word "brake" in its designation, was proposed in 1985. In 1986, the model underwent restyling, during which the appearance changed slightly. The bumpers were modernized, the front orange direction indicators were replaced with white ones. Basically, the changes affected the filling. The model received a modern instrument panel and steering column switches that control wipers, turn signals, lighting, and a sound signal. At the same time, as an option, ABS and a catalytic converter of exhaust gases began to be offered. In 1988, all-wheel drive modifications debuted, equipped with locks for all three differentials. Since 1990, all-wheel drive versions have also been offered with diesel engines. In 1993, the last copies of the BX hatchback rolled off the assembly line, and the station wagon was produced for another year, after which it was replaced by the new Xantia model. Over 2.5 million copies were produced in total. Despite the fact that the last copies of the BX rolled off the assembly line in 1994, its rectangular parallel design speaks of a very ancient origin of the model, and in modern traffic it looks like a kind of ugly duckling, which, however, is not without charm. Nevertheless, the VX has a lot of advantages, and a direct confirmation of this is the fact that its owners, if they part with their iron horse, then in most cases only in order to transfer to a more recent model from Citroen. Citroen BX was produced in two body types, a 5-door hatchback and station wagon. The latter appeared in 1985 and, according to the company's classification, had the additional designation brake. Body iron resists corrosion surprisingly well, and in all hidden cavities it is protected by a special film, glued very firmly and does not fall off with old age. Typical place, where it is worth looking for traces of the red plague, is the hind wings. By the way, the hood and tailgate are made of plastic, which, of course, does not rust. With a rather modest size, the VX has a roomy interior, in which even 5 people can feel more or less comfortable. This is achieved, among other things, due to the fact that the second row seat is pushed back somewhat more than that of classmates. The entire trunk floor of the model is flat, and the rear suspension mounting elements do not protrude in it. Prior to the 1986 modernization, the controls were very unconventional. So, the single-spoke steering wheel did not have paddle switches, and the turn signals, wipers, and lighting were turned on with special keys. Therefore, when buying a car, having a look at the controls, you can roughly determine the age of the potential acquisition and assess your readiness for the fact that key manipulations will have to be mastered, especially if you periodically need to control normal machines. In addition, we must remember that the parking brake lever locks the front wheels, and trying to use it for beautiful cornering with the skid of the rear axle can end in failure. Otherwise, the interior is quite traditional for a car of those years of production, and 3-seat adjustments allow you to comfortably sit behind the wheel. Typical salon troubles include the weakness of window handles and door locks, but they are inexpensive and easy to replace. Depending on the version, the stuffing of the VX can be either very simple, that is, practically naked, or very stuffed with all sorts of bells and whistles, power accessories, an onboard computer, an electronic dashboard, air conditioning, and other bells and whistles. This is especially true for limited editions such as Digit, Leader, Sport, Evasion, Olympique, Image. The French concern generally liked to produce special small series, which differed significantly from the basic versions. The main unconventionality of the model lies in its hydropneumatic suspension, because of which most auto mechanics and potential buyers shy away from VX like the plague. In fact, the suspension is quite simple, reliable, inexpensive to maintain and quite maintainable, but painfully specific. So, it does not have springs and shock absorbers, and their role is played by hydraulic accumulators, green spheres, screwed onto special racks. The spheres themselves are separated by an elastic membrane supported on one side by compressed nitrogen and on the other by green LHM oil. LHM is supplied through the tubes to the spheres, the pressure of which on the membranes varies depending on what unevenness the wheel has hit. This provides an amazing smooth ride. Hydraulic accumulators are very tenacious and serve for 10 or more years, subject to the following rules. Firstly, only this very special LHM oil can be poured into the hydraulic system, and secondly, the machine should not stand still for a long time. Both lead to the failure of the spheres, but they cost about $70 to $75 a piece, and the replacement operation is quite possible even in garage conditions. A fairly common phenomenon in elderly specimens is the rubbing of numerous tubes and hoses of the hydraulic system on the elements of the body and suspension. This is diagnosed as follows. At the initial stage, green streaks are visible under the car, and then the suspension simply stops working, and the car sits on its belly. Driving with an abnormally functioning suspension leads to rapid wear of other parts, for example, rear arm bearings, of which there are as many as 8 pieces, and their replacement requires special tools and literature study, which indicates tightening torques and other features that must be taken into account. The resource of the remaining elements of the chassis is very large. There are cases when they do not require attention up to 150,000 kilometers. To control the height of the body position in the cabin, a 4-position toggle switch is installed. The first position of which is the embarkation and disembarkation of passengers. For this, the car crouches. For driving on normal roads, the second position of the toggle switch, on broken ones, the third, however, due to the rising center of gravity, the car becomes more rolly in corners, but the last, fourth, position raises the body to a very decent height and allows you to drive where ordinary cars do. There is nothing. True, in this off-road position, the suspension practically ceases to perform its functions, and you can only drive at a snail's pace. By the way, some VX owners are too carried away by the Jeep abilities of the car, which as a result leads to various troubles, and although such delicate details as CB joints are covered with protective shields, and the engine crankcase does not protrude from below, it is worth assessing the condition of the components and assemblies before buying, located under the car body, for all kinds of dents and cracks. More than a dozen motors were offered for the model. The company's tradition of a digital model index indicates the volume of the engine, for example, 13x14, a 1.4-liter engine. The car used 4-cylinder carburetor engines with a volume of 1.1 liters, 55 horsepower, to 1.9 liters, 16 HP. An injection and a 16-valve gas distribution mechanism appeared only on copies of the last years of production. Several variants of diesel engines with a volume of 1.8 to 1.9 liters and a power of 60 to 90 horsepower were also offered. In general, all engines are quite reliable, but as a result of long-term domestic operation, they can throw up various troubles, the most harmless of which are failed water pumps and clogged carburetor jets. The most tenacious are 1.6 and 1.9-liter gasoline units with 2 valves per cylinder and atmospheric diesel engines. On copies of the early years of production, 4-speed manual gearboxes were installed, later replaced by 5-speed ones. An automatic 4-band gearbox was also offered, which is quite rare. The main reason leading to the failure of the box is oil leakage from under the drive seals. By the way, some modifications had a common oil sump for the gearbox and engine, and in this case, an emergency pressure sensor reported an oil shortage. In 1988, modifications with all-wheel drive debuted, equipped with locks for all differentials, front, rear and center, the rarest case in the passenger car industry. The stuffing of this almost Jeep has a lot of its own, which cannot be bought in a non-original form or purchased at a dismantling. Therefore, when purchasing the 4x4 version, it is necessary to conduct a comprehensive diagnostics at a specialized station and make a deal only after an approximate calculation of all identified defects. As for spare parts for conventional front-wheel drive vehicles, their search is not a problem. In large cities, there is almost the necessary weight in stock. Besides, bridles and assemblies can be bought at showdowns, and some parts, such as oil seals, cuffs, CB joints and something else, fit from the Peugeot 405. Nevertheless, there are more than 24 modifications of this model, not counting special series, and therefore, when buying parts you may encounter certain difficulties. And when registering a car with the authorities, be prepared for the fact that you will be sent for a specialized examination, and the weight is because most modifications do not have an engine number on the cylinder block. This very number can be written on one of the plates riveted both to the power unit and to the body. The undoubted advantages of VX include smooth running, as well as a number of other pleasant features, such as disc brakes on all wheels, power steering, with the exception of cars of the first years of production, a roomy trunk, especially for a station wagon, and, most importantly, a low the cost of a car that can be bought literally for a penny, especially if something specific has failed. Pros: smooth running, low second-hand price, high corrosion resistance. Minuses: difficulties in repair problems and the selection of spare parts, inability to carry out repairs at ordinary services.